Part 1, Introduction. Get psyched.
Psychology is all about getting inside people's heads to try and understand why they do what they do.
Oh, Mr. Freud, why do you do what you do? Mr. Freud...
Oh, go away, you little rat!
In beginning psychology, what you have to do is get inside the heads of the psychology all-stars, those geniuses who have developed the reasons why people do what they do, like Jean Piaget, B.F. Skinner, Ivan Pavlov, Sigmund Freud, of course, and a bunch of others we'll tell you about later.
Psychologists define their science as the scientific study of behavior and mental processes. Behavior is what you can see a person do, or the observable actions of an individual.
Mental processes are stuff like memories, thoughts, dreams, emotional feelings, and other conscious or unconscious experiences.
It was really pleasant visiting Grandma. Someday, I'll be a part-time bag boy. I think my left foot is bigger than my right foot. You must do evil things.
Psychology is a science that attempts to predict human behavior and mental processes. We psychologists want to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behaviors and thoughts. We observe behavior, then we try to predict future behaviors based on what we have seen.
Section A, Psychological Schools of Thought and the Nature-Nurture Debate.
Once you see that psychology is just analyzing and predicting behavior, then you can get to the work, which is looking at all the different angles that affect and determine behavior. Just like with any subject, you have to learn the vocabulary. Once you learn the terms and get to know about the people who coined them, you've learned a lot about the subject.
There are many different behaviors, and there are different angles we can use to approach these different behaviors. As a psychology student, you need to know the names of the different behaviors you probably already recognize in other people. But you need more practice. See?
In fact, you've probably heard these terms before, so they're already in your mind, all sort of jumbled together and fuzzy. But don't worry, we're going to clear it all up for you.
Are people born to act and think the way they do, or is behavior determined by the environment? This question is the crux of the nature-nurture debate.
Does a child misbehave because he inherited the tendency to be very active? Or does he misbehave because of the way his parents raise him?
Good question. Let's go to our panel of experts.
Well, Ricardo, of course it depends on who you ask. Psychologists who believe the child inherited the tendency to be active is coming down on the side of nature. In other words, they believe biology and genes and that sort of thing determine the child's behavior.
Other psychologists would have you believe that the kid gets lots of attention from his parents when he misbehaves. So since the kid likes the attention, it's likely he will misbehave. This is the nurture viewpoint, the belief that the kid's environment determines his behavior.
Aha, now isn't it true that most psychologists believe that both nature and nurture play significant roles in shaping human behavior?
Yes, that's true.
And isn't it also true that the critical question is how much nature or nurture determines behavior?
Yes, that's right.
All the major schools of psychological thought share the same goals, but each has its own way of looking at things and reaching goals. All the schools of thought try to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behavior.
Dad, that is totally unfair. It's my business if I want to dye my hair green and pierce my nose. You're always trying to control me or modify me in some junk. Ugh.
If you gathered a group of psychologists who all followed different theories in one room and asked them to analyze the same problem, you'd get a bunch of different answers. Here's how followers of the biological, psychoanalytic, behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic theories might approach the same problem.
Little Billy McCready is having a great time playing with his toys. His mom wants him to clean up and come into the kitchen for dinner, but Billy wants no part of that. So cute little Billy throws a big, bad temper tantrum.
No, I don't want to eat now.
Dear,
Why does Billy have such temper tantrums?
Mrs. McCready is frustrated and doesn't know what to do with him. Here's an overview of how followers of the major psychological schools of thought would react to Billy's tantrum. This is just an introduction. Mrs. McCready figures Billy must have inherited his father's bad temper. Followers of the biological theory would agree with her.
There's not much you can do about it. See, behavior is inherited.
The biological theorists believe that behavior is inherited, so there's not much you can do to control it. But Sigmund Freud, founder of the psychoanalytic theory, would disagree with the biological theorists.
That's ridiculous. Have you not read my psychoanalytical series?
Freud might argue that the boy is struggling with his mother for control of when and where he goes to the bathroom, since Freud believed that kids Billy's age get most of their pleasure from emptying their bladder and bowels. On the other hand, B.F. Skinner, a behaviorist psychologist, would likely tell Mrs. McCready that little Billy's behavior has nothing to do with his bladder and bowels.
Oh, Sigmund, that's a lot of bull.
In fact, Skinner would probably make Billy's mom pretty angry, because the behaviorists believe that kids perform the behaviors that their parents reinforce them for. Skinner might ask Billy's mom what she does to encourage Billy to have temper tantrums. But Mrs. McCready's ruffled feathers would be soothed by Jean Piaget and the cognitive theorists.
No, Mrs. McCready.
Who would tell her that Billy is in the pre-operational stage, so he just can't see things from her point of view. They might suggest that Billy needs to accommodate and assimilate new information so he can understand why he should eat his dinner when she asks him to. Finally, the humanistic psychologists, like Carl Rogers, would assure Mrs. McCready that Billy is just a good kid.
There's nothing wrong with this young man.
Who's trying to find out who he is so he can maximize his potential. So as you can see, there are big differences in how followers of different schools of thought approach the same problem. There's more detail on the way describing each school of thought.
Let's go over what you've got so far. Some psychologists believe that behavior is controlled by genetics and biological functions. In other words, they think behavior is controlled by nature. Others believe that people learn how to act from their environment, or that behavior is controlled by nurture. But in the nature-nurture debate, the most popular opinion is that behavior is controlled by both nature and nurture. The real debate is how much nature controls and how much nurture controls. Regardless of where they stand on the nature-nurture debate, the followers of all the major psychological schools of thought have the same goals: to describe, understand, predict, and control or modify behavior.